Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
This show is brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation as well as the Compassionate Friends. Well, Heidi, we're going to have a great show today on honoring children and really some fabulous people that have done wonderful things to honor their children.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to them because I think honoring is so important, and it's something that I try to do with Scott all the time. Our guests today are Gabrielle Doucet, Judy Pedersen, and Daniel Abut. And I can introduce them if you like.
Yeah, well, they're going to come from two separate organizations, sort of, right? And
they are.
Both of Gabrielle and
Judy.
Judy, write for the Open to Hope site.
Yep, they do. Judy and Gabrielle write for the Open to Hope site. And I met Judy several years ago in my office because we're in the same field. So we'll talk all about what she's doing with her organization.
Okay, well, let's start out with Gabrielle. Tell us about it.
Okay, Gabrielle is a registered nurse, just as you are. So you guys will have a lot in common about the mind-body connection, and that's really important. And I think sometimes we can minimize and overlook physical ramifications of grief and loss and what happens physically. And Gabrielle talks a lot about how we can take care of ourselves. How can we reduce stress? How do we stay healthy? Because as you know, after a loss, sometimes our health can deteriorate.
That's right. That's right. We have to really be careful about that.
Absolutely. She is the author of Let Go and Let Love, Survivors of Suicide Loss Healing Handbook, and her son Drew died by suicide. And Gabrielle is she has a very hopeful and positive message, which she'll be telling us a little bit about. And then we will hear from Judy Pedersen and Daniel Abut, and they are from the Hearts of Hope Foundation. And they will talk to us regarding how they have honored deceased family members, and they have done some amazing things all over the country with hearts, and have really empowered people to remember those that they've loved and lost.
Yeah, great.
So,
well, Gabrielle, welcome to the show. A fellow nurse.
Hello. Yes, we do stick together.
So, did you come to this nursing early on? You were a nurse when your son died?
Yes, nursing was my profession. So that was, the part of me that, linked medicine to my life and other people's lives and caring for other people.
Yeah, well, I was working in the field also at the University of Rochester when my son was killed, and it's such a shock to have a child die when you're in the nursing field. I think because we're around people, we've been around people and helped people and cared for people and told people his children were sick or died or whatever, or supported and been with them, and then it happens to you.
Blindsided. Everything, it seemed to me that everything I had learned and things that I were practicing completely just fell out. I mean, I stopped thinking about all the practical things that I'd been teaching and working with others. I didn't even think of it for myself.
No, it's such a physical thing. That's what got me.
Totally. I mean,
I did not realize the physical side was that profound.
Which is so, what I would like to say is that people do not realize that when they are in loss of any kind, that they kind of stop paying attention, even if they used to do that. Like, I mean, as nursing, I always had my own body in mind. But when you are in the throes of loss, you don't stop to think what this is physically going to do to your body. And I actually researched a lot of my own books simply because I wanted to talk to other families and other people who were in survivorship from suicide loss. And a huge percentage of us literally start having symptoms of physical symptoms of illness or changes in our health, small subtle things. The body starts to talk to you and say, hey, you're not paying attention, your anger or your grief or your way of coping is hurting me. And we stop thinking about our own bodies. So when I wrote the book, besides moving forward on a journey for healing from suicide loss, I always tried to bring it back to the physical body, and how if you don't pay attention to that, if you don't bring that aspect of your journey into your life, you're not going to come out of it so well.
One of the problems, I think, is there's a certain amount of shame connected with it. I mean, when Scott died, I felt like I used to run, and I felt like if I go out and run, my neighbors will be looking out the window and saying, wow, look at her, she doesn't care about her child.
Right, it's awful. The assumptions that people can make simply in a behavior that either is, you know, a consequence to us or seemed normal before, we get judged afterwards, or we think we're getting judged.
Yeah, we think we are. I think that's the big perception.
Yeah, I imagined an awful lot of things that people were thinking toward me, toward my family after Drew took his own life. That. You know, I said, I'm being judged.
I want to ask you a question about that, because my husband and I are involved in a chapter of the Compassionate Friends in Redwood City, California, and we tend to do a little go-around where we say, my child died, he was this age, this was, you know, and his name, and he died by. And after looking at your book, I am wondering, should we stop saying how our children died, or say you don't have to say how your child died? I don't know, with suicide and with the accidental overdoses and things, can people talk about how they died? Can you ask them? If somebody says to me, my child died by suicide, can I say, how did they do it? How did it happen? You know, I sometimes hear people say, well, they're real voyeurs or whatever, or is it an opportunity for them to express it and tell you and talk about it? It's very confusing.
It's a good question. And I also remember, Gabrielle, at some point reading about you that it took you 1 year to say the word suicide.
It did, actually over that, a year and a half, to say the word suicide. To address your question, I have to say that often people would ask me, you know, when I was forthright and I said that Drew died by his own hand, he died by, you know, taking his own life. If a person said to me that, well, what did he do? I really did feel, and this is an honest answer.
I appreciate that.
I felt that that was an inappropriate question, and I would recommend that. And it's not being mean, and it's not. They're not trying to be, you know, awkward with you. But often they feel awkward in having that discussion, so they will often ask the first thing that comes to their mind. The best thing that people can do, and I think that's probably why it's good for you to ask that question, is how can we support a survivor of suicide loss? What is one of the best ways? And it's to let the survivor lead the discussion. So if I said the word suicide, the discussion can be around the fact that my son Drew took his own life. To ask me how he took his own life is a step beyond what I'd be comfortable with, but it does happen. So we'll be realistic and say, when someone asks me that question, one of my tools is intention. I made my intention that I don't need to answer that question. And so I will very politely say, I don't discuss that. What I will discuss is the fact that we are working with others now in trying to help them with their survival skills.
And I like the idea that you have an answer in your head,
Right.
and to give that tool to other people that have someone that's died by suicide, so that they'll know in case it comes up, they'll know what to say.
Absolutely.
I think it does come up a lot, probably. For them.
I would think so too.
Awkward questions come up a lot from others, and I have to say that very often they just don't know what to say to you. They don't know how to broach this, and especially if they did not know that your loved one took their own life, which is a special circumstance entirely. Most recently, an interesting thing happened. Drew took his life in 2011, so you know we're talking about, you know, we're going 6 years now, and I met up with an old friend of mine that I hadn't seen in 7 years at my local post office. And her first thought was, oh my goodness, so good to see you. How is Drew? How's your daughter? And of course it was up to me to let her know that Drew was no longer with us and how he passed. And she immediately did not know what to say to me, someone I'd known for a long time. And she withdrew in herself and she started to whisper. And I said, that's okay. I understand how you feel. you can ask me you can ask me anything you like, but do know that I can discuss suicide with you, but I know it's hard. So
and you said the word.
I like that.
I said the word.
I like that you
the
said
word.
that.
Yeah.
I know it's a hard topic to discuss.
It's a
You can
hard
talk about it with me.
You can talk about it with me.
Yeah.
You can talk about it with me. And even if she said then to me that question, how did it happen? I'll say, well, I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So we don't discuss that, but I can talk about what it's like to be a survivor of suicide loss. That's the difference, is putting those things on the table. That's my biggest mission, is to help to remove the stigma.
Right.
It's not gone, so we work with that. Yeah.
So your book is wonderful, and it
Thank you
has
so much.
so much good advice and so much wonderful information. And as Heidi said, just things like you didn't talk about it for a year. I mean, what a gift that is to people to hear that it's all right.
To make a move, yes, to move forward somewhere.
Yeah. Now you're involved with suicide support groups too, right?
I do. I speak to suicide support groups, and most recently I have kind of opened up my topic to include all kinds of tragic loss, difficult loss. I had interesting thing happen to me at the end of one of my workshops. I had a woman come up to me, and she had talked about the loss of her mother, who was her best friend. And she had lost her mom just barely 2 years ago, and she says, I'm not moving forward, I'm not making any progress. And we went everywhere together. There was nothing we couldn't talk about together. And I said, I understand that. And then she said, but that is nothing in comparison to your loss of your son through suicide. And it was like this huge V8 dope slap. I said, that's not true. It's not true.
Yeah.
Your loss is every bit as difficult as mine.
Yeah,
It's just
and
different.
you said that when you platform speak too, and I love it. That I took that away from a clip we're going to show in a little while, because you said, look, the worst loss that is happening to you is the one that's happening to you right now, the one that you don't know how you're going to survive.
Right.
Because there is this idea that, okay, maybe I don't have the right to my loss because your loss is worse, those kind of things. We compare. And as a sibling, I always thought, okay, the society tells us that the parent's loss is worse than the siblings. So maybe we don't have the right, when our loss is just as bad in a different way. It's difficult.
Different.
Absolutely.
The measuring stick, the world is based on competition, and so there's this measuring stick of
Well, tell
pain.
people how to get your book, and you've got a website,
I do.
and they can also find you at Open to Hope.
That's nice, and I love writing for Open to Hope. My website is survivorhealing.com, and they can obtain my book on Amazon.com, and they can also get it as an ebook, which is really nice. A lot of people, use the Kindles, and they like to do that, and so they can download it that way. It is for all kinds of loss. So I think that the tools I discuss in there for going forward, and it's important for people to know that this book is about day 2, going forward. We do not look backward. We talk
I
about
love it. Day 2, going forward.
Day 2,
and
going
in
forward.
the end, it's not how they died, but how they lived that we love,
Right.
and how we loved them. Well, we're going to be showing a clip right now of you doing some of your wonderful training.
We are survivors of loss, but there's a lot of loss out there, all kinds of loss, and some of them are tragic. But what I'm saying is, we should not say one loss is worse than another. Right in this room, the worst loss we'll ever experience, we're very clear on that. The worst loss I will ever experience in this lifetime, or any lifetimes, is this one, suicide loss. But to the person who has tragic loss of all kinds, their loss is just as tragic and just as harsh and just as terrible to deal with. So if we're professionals and we are looking to have a professional life, and everybody has loss, then how do we use loss to inspire us? We learn something from it. We decide to make a change because of it. And if we do that, we can be open that 180-degree turnaround, which is to say, I can do something that's completely opposite to what led me from loss to begin with. So I can get inspired from my loss. I feel empowered when I make a decision. When I get inspired, I already have that. That empowerment is already churning on in front of me and within me. And all you need to have is that one feeling when you said, I can do this. I can make this happen. And before you know it, you are advancing. And to be able to take that journey between those three things, to be inspired, to be empowered with your inspiration, and to advance because of your inspiration, how can you lose?
Well, Mom, that was a great video clip from Gabrielle. And now we have two other guests that where we're going to continue this conversation, Judy Pedersen and Daniel Abut, and they are from the Hearts of Hope Foundation. So welcome to our show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's great to have you two on. Well, Daniel, I wanted to start with you because we're talking about honoring our children, and your son, Santi. Tell us a little bit about him.
Santiago, Daniel, or Santi as we call him, was the most beautiful, loving, kind, tender boy you will ever meet. He passed away 9 years ago.
Wow.
At the age of 13 from a misdiagnosed health condition. And you know very well, because you lost a son too, Gloria, how devastating losing a son is, compounded in our case by the fact that this was totally unexpected. We didn't know what had hit us. We had no idea that he had a life-threatening health condition, and imagine our shock when we found him unresponsive. So amidst the devastation that we had, one thing that I recognized early is that we needed help. It's interesting because your show is called Open to Hope, and I do believe that a big part of being open to hope is being open to help.
I like that.
Being open to help.
To help, both receiving help
I like that.
and giving help.
Yes.
And this organization, and Judy will tell more about it, is a lot about that. So when you're right, completing the circle by also helping others. So when I was seeking for help, I was introduced and referred to a number of terrific organizations, including the Compassionate Friends, which my wife and I attended their meetings in the Chatham, New Jersey chapter for many years, and found it very, very helpful. We had two daughters that were very young at the time, ages 11 and 5, so two organizations that were very helpful to them were Good Grief and Comfort Zone Camp, that focus on the children. And again, in the process of seeking help, I talked to a priest from the church that we attended, and he gave me this little business card with the Hearts of Hope logo and Judy's name, and he said, call this lady.
Yes. And so you did.
And I did. So when people use sometimes casually that expression, this was a God sent. And in the case of Judy, I strongly believe that that's the case literally.
Wow.
Since I got the introduction through the priest, that, Judy is actually an angel in disguise that came here to help us at a time that we really needed it.
Wow.
So I called her, and she came to visit us, I think the very day after.
Yes.
And brought us these beautiful ceramic hearts with the message, and it was very touching to know that somebody cared enough to have painted those hearts with that beautiful message to us. And so she introduced us to Hearts of Hope, what it meant, so much that we got involved, and it was very important for us as a family, with my wife and my daughters, to go and paint hearts for others.
And paint hearts. Well, let's talk about this, Judy. Tell us how you started Hearts of Hope. And
well,
now you're a social worker too,
yes,
right?
I am.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I was working with art while I was running bereavement groups, and it was so popular, and people loved it, and they loved the activity of being able to touch something and create something. And at that time, I was working in a hospital and a healthcare system, and that was when 9/11 occurred. And so our whole country was changed by that, including me, including all the people I was serving in my group. And I went to my director and I said, our group members are loving working with clay. They love it so much that what if we created a piece that was already fired, already ready, and allowed people to just make their own creations, and we will create gifts and give those to the families. We were all kind of scratching our heads saying, what can I do? What can I do?
Yes, I remember.
And this was something to do, to address the grief that we all felt and try to reach out and pay it forward with some expression of caring to families that were experiencing something so traumatic. And so a couple of years later, Hearts of Hope were created then, and a couple of years later, I formed this organization in order to serve people who were experiencing grief and loss. Loss that comes with so many things. And we reached out through compassionate outreach, through counseling, through educational workshops. But I can tell you that these little hearts, this little outreach, is the thing that the company has evolved to. It became what people wished to do. So even among people who were experiencing the most traumatic events, they wished to help someone else. And I think it is the knowing that something can have such a huge impact that makes you more compelled to say, I want to do something for someone else.
Yeah.
Because I'm there, I get it, and I want to help someone else. Just to let them know you're
Kind
not
of
alone.
goes from being a victim to being proactive,
Exactly.
helping other people moving along. So you have groups, and tell us what it would be like. What if I said, oh, I got in touch with you and said I want to do
wanna do
Hope.
this.
What does it look like?
We would send you a box, and in that box would be unpainted ceramic hearts and paintbrushes, paints, message cards, gift bags, ribbons, and then you would be invited to use your own creativity to create the design and then put a ribbon on it, and it's a beautiful gift from that point. And then you write your message of caring, and on that message is your first name and the city and state where you live, and a little bit about you. So it might be, in my case, I love dogs. I love to paint. And then the message of caring can be anything. And when groups get together in small groups or larger groups, they already have the intention identified. And so, for example, when we have our chapters, and we've got chapters now in 4 states that get together as a community, and they meet once a month, and each month there is a designated intention. And so this month might be for autistic families experiencing the journey of autism. Or next month might be, we're going to go to the burn center and give to all the patients and all the healthcare professionals. Or we just started a chapter in Hearts of Hope, North Jersey. We delivered, the entire group painted Hearts of Hope for the good grief families. And so it could be anything. And it's, as one person in Connecticut, we have 2 chapters in Connecticut, as one person put it, it's an entry point. It's a place where I want to do something. I'm not sure what it is or how I'm going to do it, but it creates an easy entry point to reach out and help someone in need.
I like that idea of an easy entry point because, you know, sometimes people say to us, well, you created Open to Hope and all that, or I'm going to create a foundation, which is fine, but sometimes people, it's really, you can do things like this. You don't have to do giant.
Yes.
The other
kind
piece
of
is,
things.
after a loss, people will come to you and say, what can I do? Well, when we're grieving, sometimes we don't know. That's an overwhelming question. So like you said, to go in and help, and you're not asking them to come up with the ideas.
Yes. Yes.
In fact, you may want to tell the story of Newtown and how that became a chapter, right?
Definitely,
Thank
yes.
you, Daniel.
Well, I can tell you that that's when a big shift for our organization occurred, because we were providing all of the services everywhere. Hearts of Hope was getting to be a bigger and bigger piece of what we do. But after the tragedy that occurred in Newtown, I had phone calls beginning the day after. I would like to get a kit of hearts, and I want to make hearts for Newtown. I want to get a kit, and I want to make hearts for Newtown. And so we were collecting, people were painting them all over the country. I was collecting them all. I organized a group of volunteers, and we, together with a couple of volunteers from the New Jersey area, we met 12 volunteers from the Newtown area, and we distributed 2,500 of these little treasures. In fact, one of the people in Newtown refers to them as tangible prayers. So our little tangible prayers were hanging on doorknobs, on police stations, from trees, and the outreach was just incredible. So much so that that's where the chapter began.
The amazing thing is that with the reaction that happened after, not only people were touched by it, I said, now I want to do it myself. I want to pay forward. So the Newtown community wanted to paint hearts for others.
That's so neat, because you think of them as at Newtown, you know, terrible, and they're saying, yeah, I'm going to do something to help other people that have had this.
And unfortunately,
fabulous.
shortly after that was the Boston marathon bombing, and so the people from Newtown started to paint hearts for them.
I
and
love
they were
it.
sent to
People in
Boston.
Newtown said, we're mobilizing now And we're doing this now, and they created 1,500.
Oh my gosh.
And a group of volunteers from Newtown and a group of people from Boston, we all met. We handed them all out in Copley Square in one afternoon.
That's very
That
cool.
is so
That is a great
I love
idea.
that story because it just puts a smile on your face.
Yeah.
You know.
As a grief professional,
your
we are
heart.
asked all the time, what can I do?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that it's sometimes a hard question to answer, but I think for me, when I'm asked that question, I'll say, just show up.
Yeah.
And just showing up can be a call,
Right.
a cake, or a heart of hope. It's the showing up, it's the acknowledging, and it's a circle of support. And you know, being a humble social worker, I've always liked to see that circle come
Yeah.
together.
That's so sweet. Well, I want to make sure before we end this show, how we find out about Hearts of Hope. Where's your website? Daniel, you're on the board.
He's the
Yes.
vice president. of
Fast
our
forward
board.
9 years after, and now I the vice president of the
And I
board.
know also for people that are watching this show, if you go to Hearts of Hope, they would love to have donations too, because you have to have donations to pay for all these
Yes.
wonderful boxes
That's an
you're
important
sending
lead
out.
because we are growing a lot and we have 4 chapters already, but we
Yes.
would like to have more. And actually, the 2 components for us to grow more is donations and grants, but also volunteers, because the people that actually volunteer their time to go to a heart painting event and spend 2 hours with us painting
that's
heart,
great.
that's very important.
Okay, so volunteers. So
volunteers
how
and
do they
volunteers and
find
funding.
you? Hearts of Hope.
It's ourheartsofhope.org.
Okay, ourheartsofhope.org. So you hear that you can not only get a package to do some hearts, but you can volunteer to help other people, and
Yes.
and you can start your own
And you
chapter,
could
right?
start a chapter
you
as
can.
well.
Start your
I
own
love this.
chapter.
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys for all
Yes,
you're
thank
doing
you.
and for being on the show.
Thank
and
you so
it's
much.
really inspirational.
And Santi's memory lives alive. It's alive, and he's guiding all this. I really believe that, and you're doing as much for him in his death as you did in his life through Hearts of Hope to help the world.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
We want to thank you for watching the show today, and we hope that you'll tell your friends about it and let them know. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.